I don't get it. Brianna Stewart, Aja Wilson, wait until you see what they did for Kelsey Plum tonight. They get all the calls, touch fouls, anything. And guess what happens? Aliyah Boston, the best center in the game, and guess what happens to her? She gets called for every touch foul and ends up in foul trouble this entire season and is still putting up MVP type numbers. What happens with Caitlin Clark? Have you ever seen her get a touch foul, a phantom call? No. The physicality, that's the WNBA when it comes to Caitlin Clark. But anybody else, the physicality disappears and it's foul after foul.
That's the story you were told. That's the narrative that exploded across the internet after the Indiana Fever suffered a shocking 89-87 loss to the Los Angeles Sparks. The story was simple, and it was angry. The Fever and their superstar-in-waiting, Caitlin Clark, were robbed by the referees. And that story was seemingly confirmed by their own head coach, Stephanie White. But that story is a lie. And tonight, we're going to expose it. Because what the viral clips didn't show you, what the mainstream media ignored, were the words Stephanie White said moments later. Words that reveal the real reason the Fever collapsed. And she didn't blame the refs. She blamed her own team. Okay, if you're like me and you're here to connect the dots and get the real story behind the headlines, do me a favor and smash that like button. It's a zero-cost way to tell us we're on the right track, and it helps our investigation reach more narrative analysts like you. To understand the lie, you first have to understand why it was so believable and why this loss sent such shockwaves through the league. You have to remember the context. The Indiana Fever walked into this game on an absolute tear. They were riding a 3-game winning streak, their best of the season, and they were doing it all without Caitlin Clark. This wasn't a fluke. They had just dismantled the league's best team, the Minnesota Lynx, to win the franchise's first ever Commissioner's Cup. They followed that up by destroying the defending champion Las Vegas Aces, snapping a brutal 16-game losing streak against them that went all the way back to 2019. The momentum was real. The hype was deafening. ESPN's matchup predictor gave them a staggering 72.9% chance of victory against the Sparks. The betting markets had them as heavy 6.5-point favorites. Everyone, and I mean everyone, expected them to handle business, even while shorthanded. But that's just it. They weren't just shorthanded. They were a ghost ship. Caitlin Clark was sidelined for her 5th straight game with a nagging groin injury. Key front court presence Damiris Dantas was overseas on international duty. And veteran forward DeWanna Bonner, who was supposed to be a steadying voice in the locker room, had just been waived after quitting on the team. It was, as our research shows, the perfect storm for a catastrophic failure. So, you have a heavily favored team missing its 3 most important players, collapsing in a heartbreaking loss to a massive underdog. The fan base is emotionally volatile, looking for answers, looking for someone to blame. They needed a simple explanation for a complex failure. And then Stephanie White walked to the podium for the post-game press conference. The tension was thick. Reporters were asking about the fourth quarter collapse, about the Sparks living in the paint and getting to the free throw line. And that's when she delivered the 5 words that lit the match. We didn't get the calls. That was it. That's all it took. It was the perfect soundbite. Short, emotional, and powerful. It was a direct validation of every fan screaming at their television. It confirmed every suspicion. In that moment, Stephanie White gave the entire fan base permission to believe the game wasn't lost. It was stolen. And her statement seemed to perfectly explain the controversial plays everyone was already furious about. Plays like this one.
This is fourth quarter. Look at this. This one pissed me off. Kelsey Plum seriously elbows Lexi Hall, then purposely steps over so she couldn't get up. Lexi Hall can't believe it. That's a foul. The ref was right there in front of her. And then here we go. And they kept McDonald in foul trouble the entire game. There's 2 in a row where she didn't do anything. Look at that. Just had her arms in the air, but they gave, this is the 4th quarter. And they just kept giving every single call. I like Aliyah Boston finally getting pissed off. Then they call this away from the ball in the 4th quarter. Nothing going on. Just to put him at the line, and then Kelsey plumb another one. But when Howard drives and gets slashed across the face, no foul, just out of bounds.
A player gets grabbed by the neck, and it's a jump ball. On top of that, you had the franchise centerpiece Aliyah Boston getting hit with what the original video called a series of phantom touch fouls that put her in foul trouble all night. The narrative wrote itself. The refs had it out for the Fever. Period. Honestly, it's a compelling case. When you see plays like that, it's easy to get swept up in the emotion. What do you think? Based on that evidence alone, was the game rigged? Let me know your gut reaction in the comments below. And that is the story that was sold to you. That is the narrative that viral videos and fan forums ran with for days. It's the easy story. It's the emotional story. But it's not the true story, because what we're about to show you is what happened when the main cameras were off and the follow-up questions were asked. The full context reveals that Stephanie White's viral quote wasn't a genuine complaint. It was a strategic deflection, because in that same press conference, she laid out the real reasons for the loss, and they had nothing to do with the referees. So what is the first part of this hidden confession from Stephanie White? What's the first piece of the puzzle that the media conveniently left on the cutting room floor? It's simple, and it's a direct contradiction to blaming the referees. When White was pressed on her team's defensive failures in that game, she didn't double down on the officiating. She looked inward. She said, quote, "We fouled too much. For one, we were a step slow on a lot of stuff." Her own player, Sydney Colson, echoed that sentiment, admitting, "We were a step slow, I think, on a lot of stuff, and not as physical as we were those other 2 games." Now, for the narrative analysts watching, you know we don't just take their word for it. We need the data to back it up. We need the receipts, and the receipts are damning. This wasn't a one-night anomaly of bad whistles. According to our deep search, the Indiana Fever have a chronic, season-long problem with discipline. Entering that game, they were averaging 20.9 personal fouls per contest, the second most in the entire WNBA. The 24 fouls they committed against the Sparks marked the 11th time that season they had committed 20 or more fouls in a single game. This is a pattern of behavior. It's a systemic weakness in their defensive identity, and it's a weakness the Sparks ruthlessly exploited. Listen to this exchange right here, where a reporter asks White about the Sparks getting whatever they wanted in the 4th quarter.
Cunningham, Colson, give and go, and Colson hits a 3. That's called a boomerang pass?
They had that and 9 free throws. Do you see the disconnect? The viral narrative is that the refs gave the game to the Sparks, but the reality, admitted by the coach herself, is that the Sparks took it. They built a game plan around attacking the paint to exploit a team they knew couldn't defend without fouling. The 9 4th-quarter free throws weren't a gift. They were the calculated result of a brilliant strategy. So let's connect the dots. The public story is, we didn't get the calls. The private admission, backed by hard data, is we foul more than almost anyone, and our opponent took advantage of it. Those are 2 very different realities, and we're just getting started. We've established the defensive collapse wasn't about biased whistles. It was about a lack of discipline, a problem the Fever have had all season long. But that's only half the story of this loss. What about the offense? What happened when Indiana had the ball with a chance to win the game? Again, the viral narrative would have you believe they never had a fair shot. But Stephanie White's own words, hidden in the full transcript of her press conference, expose an even more painful truth. She didn't just blame her defense. She blamed her offense's inability to think and execute under pressure. Just listen to this. This is the part of the interview that was completely ignored.
Comes up with the block. Colson launch ahead. Oh, a la Caitlin Clark.
Let that sink in. I didn't feel like our execution was all that good. At the end, I felt like in our reset timeout, it wasn't very good either. This is a coach admitting that with the game on the line, her players failed to run the plays they drew up. This isn't about a missed shot. This is about a complete breakdown in process. She is taking direct responsibility, saying, "That's on us," to make sure they are sharper in those moments. It's a stunning admission of internal failure that completely dismantles the "ref stole it" narrative. How often do you hear a coach, moments after a devastating loss, so openly state that their team failed to execute a specific play call from a timeout? Drop a comment below if you think that's a rare and brutal level of honesty. This statement from White is an incredible claim. But is it just a coach venting frustration? Or does the game tape actually prove her right? Well, we went back and analyzed the final possessions, and what we found proves that Stephanie White knew exactly what she was talking about. The final 103 seconds of this game are the ultimate exhibit for her case, and the footage is even more damning than her words. Alright, let's put on our analyst hats and break down the tape. This is where the lie completely unravels. The clock is ticking down in the fourth quarter. The Indiana Fever appeared to be in control. They hold an 87-83 lead with just 1 minute and 43 seconds to play. From that point forward, they would not score again. The Sparks claw back. With 57 seconds remaining, Sparks forward Rakea Jackson makes a layup to give Los Angeles a 1-point lead, 88-87. It's gut check time for the Fever. On the ensuing possession, Aliyah Boston, their star center, misses a layup, but then a moment of hope. With just under 30 seconds left, Fever guard Ari McDonald comes up with a massive steal, giving Indiana the ball back with a chance to win the game. This is the exact moment Coach White was talking about. This is the reset. They have the ball, they can call a timeout, they can run one perfect play to win the game. The outcome is entirely in their hands. And here is what their execution produced. First, Ari McDonald misses a go-ahead three-pointer from 27 feet out. But wait, Fever guard Lexi Hull snags a critical offensive rebound, a second chance, a golden opportunity to reset and score. Instead, Hull immediately throws up an 11-foot jump shot and misses that too. The Sparks get the rebound and are immediately fouled. They would make one free throw, extending their lead to 89-87. The Fever get one last final chance. After a timeout to drop a game-tying play, the ball goes to Aliyah Boston, who attempts a 21-foot jumper at the buzzer, and it's no good. Game over. Let's be perfectly clear. That sequence is not the story of a game being stolen by referees. That is the story of a team failing to execute. They missed their last 5 consecutive shots. On the final decisive possession, which they gained from a steal, they missed 3 separate field goal attempts. This is the living, breathing embodiment of what Stephanie White meant when she said, "I didn't feel like our execution was all that good." The evidence is undeniable. The loss was without a question a self-inflicted wound. The evidence is overwhelming. The Indiana Fever lost the game against the Sparks because of 2 internal failures, a chronic lack of defensive discipline, and a complete collapse of offensive execution in the final minute. This brings us to the most important question in our entire investigation. The question every true narrative analyst should be asking right now. Why? Why would Coach Stephanie White, in her post-game press conference, publicly blame the referees if she knew with absolute certainty that her own team was at fault? Was it just a moment of uncontrolled frustration? A simple emotional outburst? No. The answer is far more complex and far more brilliant than that. What we witnessed in that press conference was not a coach losing her cool. What we witnessed was a masterclass in strategic leadership. The "we didn't get the calls" soundbite wasn't a complaint. It was a calculated deflection. It was a lightning rod, intentionally thrown into a storm of media questions and fan anger to draw all the electricity towards one single point: the officials. Think about it. By creating a common enemy, she instantly shielded her players from the brutal public fallout of their own mistakes. Instead of the narrative being "Fever choke in final minute," it became Fever robbed by refs. She absorbed all the pressure and redirected it. It was an act of psychological protection for a team that was already emotionally fragile from injuries and roster turmoil. She knew she would hold them accountable behind the closed doors of the locker room and the film room. Her full comments prove that, but in the court of public opinion, she built a fortress around her team and dared the world to attack the walls, all while knowing the real problems were inside. This is the kind of 4D chess that separates good coaches from truly great leaders. She was playing a different game than everyone else in that room. But a coach only deploys a high-risk strategy like that when the problems are deeper than just one bad night. A 5-alarm fire requires a 5-alarm response. And when you zoom out from this single game and look at the entire season, you realize this collapse wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom of a much larger disease. Let's start with the team's performance when the pressure is highest. Our deep search file reveals a disturbing trend. The loss to the Sparks dropped the Indiana Fever's record in clutch games, defined as contests within 5 points in the final 5 minutes, to a dismal 3 wins and 10 losses. This isn't a team that had one bad night executing on franchise-owned performance. This is a team that has consistently failed to perform when the game is on the line all season. Now, let's connect that on-court problem to the off-court turmoil. Just days before this game, the team was rocked by the departure of veteran forward DeWanna Bonner. This wasn't a simple roster move. Bonner, a 6-time All-Star and 2-time champion, was the team's prize off-season acquisition, praised by Coach White as the strongest voice in our locker room. But after just 9 games, she was gone. League sources reported she had no interest in returning to the team, fundamentally dissatisfied with being moved to a bench role. This whole saga points to a significant misstep in roster construction and a clear source of locker room friction. So let's connect these dots for the final analysis. You have a team that is statistically one of the least disciplined defensive units in the league. You have a team that has a documented pattern of failing to execute in clutch situations. And you have a locker room that was still dealing with the aftershocks of a key veteran essentially quitting on them just weeks earlier. Seen through this lens, the loss to the Sparks wasn't a shocking upset at all. It was the predictable, almost inevitable result of a team whose foundational cracks were finally exposed by an opponent with the perfect game plan. The lie wasn't just to protect the players from one bad loss. It was to protect the entire organization from confronting these much deeper, more troubling truths. So, in the end, the story of the Fever's loss to the Sparks isn't the simple rage-inducing tale of a rigged game that the internet wanted you to believe. The truth is infinitely more complex. It's a story about a coach who told a necessary lie to the public to protect her team from the harsh glare of the spotlight. It's about a team whose systemic flaws, a lack of discipline, a pattern of failing under pressure, and the ghosts of locker room turmoil all came home to roost in one catastrophic collapse. The lie wasn't the story. The lie was a symptom of the story. The real question is whether this painful, embarrassing loss and the master-level deflection from their coach will be the crucible that finally forges championship character, or just another crack in a fracturing foundation. So what's your take on all this? Was Stephanie White's public lie a brilliant act of leadership to protect her young team? Or was it a desperate move that ultimately avoids accountability for the real recurring problems on her roster? Let us know your verdict in the comment section below. We are going to be tracking this team relentlessly, especially with the impending return of Caitlin Clark and Damiris Dantes, to see if they can actually fix these fatal flaws. To make sure you don't miss our analysis when their revenge tour officially begins, be sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications. And finally, if you know another WNBA fan who got swept up in the rigged game narrative, do them a favor and share this video. It's time everyone knew the real story.